Tom Brady won his first Super Bowl the day after I turned 7 years old, and he's going to start his broadcasting career 6 years after I did. And that's all to say, I know there's a huge difference between him and I, even though we're both technically former quarterbacks, now broadcasters. That being said, as somebody who got their opportunity to call games by being a quarterback at USC and Pitt, I do think I can offer some perspective about what that transition is like. That's different than what other creators can say. Tom Brady is the GOAT when it comes to quarterback playing on the field, but can he become the GOAT in the booth as well? Let's first set the stage by outlining how much Fox is betting on Tom Brady's success as a broadcaster. Betting so much in the range of $37.5 million annually for a dude that has never called a football game. That's a $375 million contract over 10 years. And that's not even the start of it. That contract went into place while he was still a Buccaneer, still playing football. That's absurd. They let Troy Aikman and Joe Buck walk, two of the most respected broadcasters, one of the most respected duos in football broadcasting. They said, all right, peace. We got another dude coming in the pipeline. And then three, and this is almost like the funniest one, they told Greg Olsen, yeah, you're a great broadcaster. He's their number one dude. The dude's calling a Super Bowl. He said, yeah, you can keep Tom Brady's seat warm until he's ready to get in the booth. That is crazy, but that shows you how much they are investing in Tom Brady's success and how much Tom Brady's brand, reputation, and his legacy, how much value that has in the football world. But let's get it straight. Tom Brady's success is going to come down to three factors. One, his play-by-play partner. Who's he paired up with? Obviously, he's going to be paired up with an absolute pro, but you see it sometimes. Sometimes personalities don't mesh. Sometimes it's stiff in the booth. And then on the flip side, sometimes the personalities are great. As I'm saying that out loud, the TNT crew for basketball, Shaq, Chuck, Kenny, they crush it all the time. How will those personalities gel? Two, how will Tom Brady adjust as a former player? It's just different wearing a helmet versus wearing a suit. It's just different up there. It's a different skill set. You see it all the time. Dudes that weren't necessarily the best players. Dan Orlovsky, he had a way better NFL career than I ever did, so who am I to say anything? But relative to the other quarterbacks in that era, he is by far and away one of the most successful broadcasters today, but he didn't necessarily have one of the most successful football careers back in the day. And then three, for Tom Brady, what's his attention to detail like? Which I can't even believe I'm saying that because Tom Brady has prided himself and made a career off of fine-tuning every last detail, but you see it all the time. Sometimes former players mail it in and they don't prep to the level that they should. And sometimes they get exposed out there. Don't think that'll happen to Tom Brady, but those to me are the three key factors. So the first item of business, who's going to be Tom Brady's partner in the booth? And from firsthand experience, a play-by-play guy can make or break your experience in the booth. The great play-by-play guys, they keep it light in the booth. They're always mindful of teeing you up in scenarios where you know you can offer insight. And to me, this is almost the biggest thing. There's that banter in the booth where there isn't that guard up from either side, from Tom or his play-by-play guy. And they almost invite that. They almost want that. One of the best pieces of advice I got as a color commentator is the viewer on the other side of the screen from you should walk away from that broadcast being like, yo, I'd love to have a beer with Tom Brady. And obviously everyone would love to have a beer with Tom Brady, but in terms of that personality component. And when we go down the list of other former big time quarterbacks that have had success transitioning from huge playing careers into the booth being big time color guys, first name that sticks out, Phil Simms, still on the TV screen, not calling games, now in the studio. His partners, Greg Gumbel, a pro, Jim Nantz, a pro, was with CBS and was their number one dude for 20 years until I believe Tony Romo took his seat. The second one, Troy Aikman. We just talked about him. I love listening to Troy. I think Troy has a big game voice. It's sometimes a term you hear. Like when Troy's calling a game, it just feels like a big time game. I think he meshes his football knowledge in a way that's very digestible and concise and never gets too long-winded, and he combines it well with just some of the personality nuggets as well. So I'm a big fan of Troy. You also got Peyton Manning. He's having success, not necessarily in your traditional color commentary role, but he founded his own media company. The Manning Cast is crushing it. And what Peyton Manning's done the best is his personality shines through. The personality that we saw in his interviews have come through as a color commentator, and I think he's done a great job. And then Greg Olsen, with Greg, one of the most impressive things for me is he got his start in a bye week while he was playing for the Panthers. So even if you're an aspiring broadcaster watching this, just like the entrepreneurial spirit to be thinking ahead and get that gig, like his timing, like who knows where he'd be at if him and Tom Brady like retired at the same time. Like he had a window right here where if he had waited a couple years, he might not be at the level that he's at. He was proactive with that, which I always respect, because in football color commentating, there's only so many games to go around. In basketball, there's tons of games. Baseball, there's tons of games, 162 a year. With football, there's only so many seats at the table. Greg Olsen, the fact that he's climbed to a point where he is the number one dude and a stud at doing it, and a non-quarterback, don't sleep on that. And a non-quarterback, it's hard to be an elite color commentator as a non-quarterback because when you were playing, you weren't asked to know everything. The fact that he's a tight end, obviously he had a huge playing career and knows a ton, but the fact that he was able to do that shows just a ton of talent. I think Greg Olsen, he ain't going anywhere. But yeah, a play-by-play guy is huge. Two dudes in my personal career that stand out. Ari Wolf, he was the first play-by-play guy I ever had when calling UAB at Louisiana Tech. It was a double OT thriller. It was the first time I ever put on the suit and was in the booth. One thing I'll always respect and appreciate of him, he went out of his way to look out for me, to make sure that I was prepped in between commercial breaks, ahead of the game, tell me more like the logistical stuff, which I think will be a huge factor that Tom Brady will have to navigate. Things that you don't even realize when you're at home sitting on your couch. Like Ari went out of his way to look out for me. And then JB Long, he's been my partner for most of the past few years calling Pac-12 games. I always respect and appreciate how he'll ask me how he's doing, or can he do anything better? Can he tee me up in a better way? He's always texting during the week to make sure we're on the same page. I think he embraces that banter back and forth too, which I think makes for the best gig, the best television when you have that back and forth. And I always will appreciate both those guys and hope I'll work with them both down the road. But with all the guys that crushed it in terms of transitioning into the booth, there's also dudes that did not do so hot. Running down a few of the names, Joe Montana. I've honestly never even heard an interview of Joe Montana. Maybe outside of the Notre Dame halftime interviews. I really don't even know what Joe Montana sounds like on camera. And it's funny because for a while there, you compared Tom Brady and Joe Montana on the field. You would think that with all these names, the Phil Simms of the world, the Troy Aikmans of the world, that Joe Montana would just, fall right in line with that. But it hasn't happened. Hey, guess it wasn't for Joe. Did one season in 1995 and 1996 for NBC. One of his partners was Mike Ditka, though. That'd be good television. Joe Montana, Mike Ditka. But hey, didn't work out. Also didn't work out for Jerry Rice. Was 2 years as an in-studio analyst for ESPN in 2009 through 2011. And Jerry Rice said, no, I'm good here. Joe Namath, same deal, right? Joe Montana, Joe Namath, you go Tom Brady, like the GOATs. Joe Namath just seems like, too cool for school, but only lasted one season as the color commentator for Monday Night Football in 1985. Get this though, one of his broadcast partners, O.J. Simpson. Again, that's gnarly, but I'm sure that people tuned in. And then most recently, and this one almost kind of makes me feel bad, but Drew Brees didn't work out. And he seems like a stud. He seems like a great chat, great dude, great hang, but on the Notre Dame broadcast, that was just a weird broadcast year. And hey, what honestly jumps out is Drew Brees, he got really thrown into the fire and he goes straight from playing right into the broadcasting side. And it takes some games to get reps under your belt, to get comfortable, and to have Notre Dame front and center, whole college football world's watching. Tom Brady's going to have even more attention than that. And for whatever reason, it just never meshed well for Drew Brees there. He signed that multi-year deal with NBC and his partner was Mike Tirico. He's an absolute pro, but I believe they mutually agreed to just, go their separate ways. And I also think that's a byproduct of embarking in a profession that is very public in the social media age. And that to me would be a top concern for Tom Brady. Not that he won't be good down the road, but he's going to be under a microscope to start. And people are going to be looking at Tom of, hey, is it the same Tom we're used to seeing behind the mic? And if he's stiff at all, people are going to come at him. But let's unpack Tom's situation a little bit. So Greg Olsen and Kevin Burkhardt are in their final season as the top crew for Fox. They could stay together, or everything you read thinks that Tom Brady is going to be paired with Kevin Burkhardt, and then we'll see what happens with Greg Olsen. He mentioned he wanted to interview for the Panthers head coaching job. Greg Olsen's going to have options. If he wants to be in broadcasting, he'll be just fine. If it's not Kevin Burkhardt for Tom Brady, the other guy it could be is Joe Davis. Joe Davis currently paired with Daryl Moose Johnson. And it's funny, Joe kind of looks like Tom Brady, which that would just be kind of funny on camera. And the other side, if I'm Fox, the angle that could play is Tom Brady and Joe Davis, both younger guys, relatively speaking. They could really climb together in the industry. As I say that, it reminds me of a Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. That could be one of those pairs 20 years from now that we're saying, you know what, this duo thought they could be something and then they really leveled up. But if you're betting man, it's probably Kevin Burkhardt. And if you're betting man, Tom Brady's going to have success. But if he doesn't, some of the factors that jump out to me are, one, if it just doesn't go smoothly in those first few games. We talked about that with Drew Brees. It felt like those first few games were kind of awkward. You get this negative storm on Twitter, and then before you know it, it's wait, this is Drew Brees we're talking about. Is it what? How did it get to this point? And then at that point, it's I'm out of here. And that could only happen is if Tom Brady, he's stiff early on or he's not smooth, and then the stakes are really high. And I can't believe I'm even saying that about Tom Brady because he's like literally one of the most clutch athletes ever. But that can happen. It's a different realm playing quarterback than being in the booth. Other couple factors, he's become an owner. He tried to buy a minority stake in the Raiders. That's always on his mind. That would just be a unique balance. Sports ownership and big time color commentator. He also has his clothing brand that was recently merged with Noble. You know, he's got other things out there, and he mentioned when he retired that he was looking forward to allocate that time towards his businesses. And so for whatever reason, he's not prepping to that level on Sundays, which again, this is not going to happen. The prep is not going to be a thing with Tom Brady, but it's at least a factor that we need to bring up. One thing that is real though on the prep side is when you're close to the NFL, which Tom Brady is, the prep you don't need as much because you know a lot of the players in the league. And so it's very easy to have that be a crutch of, hey, I know so-and-so running back. Hey, I remember when this dude was drafted to my team. Hey, I've been following this guy's career. And you have those nuggets. The more you get removed, the harder it is to stay on the beat of the sport, which is another reason that I wanted to do this show to keep me on track, force me to break down things, force me to do a whole segment on Tom Brady's broadcasting contract. So when I get asked about it, I know that. Another segment in this show is about Clemson. That's prep that I wouldn't have done without this show. And it's a result of me getting further and further removed from my playing days. You gotta stay up on that prep. But I think Tom Brady will. I'm betting on Tom Brady's competitive spirit. He's not going to want to be the guy that's mailing it in. That's just not who his identity is. His identity is being the GOAT on the field. And to me, to be the GOAT as a broadcaster, the key difference, in my opinion, with color commentators who are elite versus color commentators who are average. Elite color commentators talk in a way where they're forward thinking. They're not always saying what just happened. Oh, that was a carry to the left for 7 yards. Ooh, that carry happened because it was a toss sweep and boom, 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 boom. No, they're saying, hey, that toss sweep is going to open up the reverse pass or the double reverse, or that toss sweep is going to open up this pass concept because the defense is overplaying. They're talking in that forward thinking lens, which one is just more interesting. It's definitely more insightful. And it just is, it's more engaging rather than just repeating exactly what I heard on the screen. So that is to me always the key factor when trying to analyze what big time color commentators do versus what are maybe the guys just kind of mailing it in on their prep or don't have that knowledge base like I think Tom Brady will to really tap into. When looking at Tom Brady and the biggest adjustments he's going to have, and these are just from, firsthand experience for me. One, it's so easy to over prep, and any interview, I heard Tom Brady on the Pat McAfee show recently saying, he's prepping a bunch, watching a bunch of film, and I'm sure he'll take a bunch of notes. Those first few games that I called, it's so easy to just get buried in your notes, and when a play happens, you go straight to your 3 bullet points that I have on Joe Jones, and it's bing, bing, bing. That's not great television either. It's good to have those nuggets. It's good to sprinkle them in, but it's more important, again, to digest what's going on in the field and then talk about it forward thinking with how that's impacting the flow of the rest of the game, or how is that play related to the play that we saw 3 plays ago, rather than getting so lost into the prep. I'm to the point now where I'll actually decrease my prep and intentionally put less notes on the page so I don't get lost on my call sheet. Second aspect is just some of the logistics. There's some just like basic color commentating principles that Tom Brady's gonna have to get used to. After a touchdown play, don't ever interrupt your play-by-play guy. Some color commentators do that. Don't interrupt your guy. Let him do his whole thing. That's his moment. That's a play-by-play guy's moment to go do his thing. Let the play breathe, especially in the NFL where you're gonna have big crowds and tons of emotion. As a color commentator, don't talk right away. That was one of the best pieces of advice that I got, because color commentators, you feel the need to talk all the time. That's an adjustment in itself, is you feel like, oh, the mic's on me, I gotta talk. Sometimes letting the play breathe and not talking is a better viewing experience and something that I'm, still getting used to. And then 3, this might just be a Max Brown thing, but one of the biggest adjustments I had to do or had to get used to was asking questions. Interviewers make it look so easy. They make it look so conversational, but when a player comes on and you're forced to ask questions and forced to react on the fly, that's harder than it looks. The good ones make it look easy. That's not a skill set everyone can have. If you have the questions lined up and you're able to reference them, that's one thing. But just reacting on the fly, that's a different beast. And because of that, this was interesting. Bob Costas said that he thought Tom Brady should be a studio host or a studio analyst before a color commentator, because there's just more on your plate as a color commentator. You are forced to drive the show. When it's the first possession and Pat Mahomes is walking out there in the Super Bowl, it is your empty canvas and you have the pen, you have the paintbrush, that's a better example, to depict the scene that you want for the viewer. viewer. That's an art. That's a skill right there. Versus a in-studio host, you are getting asked the questions and you're able to just kind of react on the fly. You're able to just kind of be an athlete, be a football player, give your 2 cents. Yes, you still have to prep, but it's a different skill set that you got to bring to the table. And I'll wrap it up here. My prediction, I think Tom Brady is going to be a phenomenal color commentator. But I also think there are going to be nuggets of criticism early on for him that he's too stiff in front of the camera. Again, I got those a little bit early on too, because you get so locked in your prep and you don't want to mess up and you get so, you're not sure exactly when the personality element should flow in and when it's okay to make a joke versus when you need to just get all the notes that you've spent the whole week on prepping for, get those out. And sometimes that can come across too stiff. Tom Brady has a great personality and you can see that in interviews, but that would be the one thing that in those first 6 games, I think he'll have to work through. But when it's all said and done, I think Tom Brady's going to crush it as a color commentator. He's got the knowledge, he's got the legacy, he's got the personality, and he's shown that he can joke with himself, which I think is just as important with anything of being on camera, the amount that he's going to be on.